now welcome to the stage co-founding mother of the Ms. Foundation for Women, Gloria Steinem.
It's so interesting that I get to be a mother. If you go online, you will discover Dream Hampton's amazing, amazing career. Everything that she has done, that she has written, all the images and words and justice and love that she has brought into our lives. But I didn't know how to describe her, so I called up Time's Up and I said, okay, what does she mean to all of the women of Time's Up? Here's what they said. Dream Hampton's beautiful and chilling docuseries demanded we hear the voices of Black girls and women, voices that have been ignored for far too long as R. Kelly's career flourished. In 2017, Kenyette Barnes and Oraniki Odelea founded the Mute R. Kelly campaign, shining light on the decades of abuse and refusing to accept the implication that somehow the abuse of women of color can be normalized. Dream's docuseries not only helped chronicle the stories of these three brave survivors, it also made it abundantly clear that being in business with R. Kelly was akin to profiting off the trauma of Black girls and women. Dream's docuseries has empowered more survivors to speak out against R. Kelly. And in response, radio stations nationally have stopped playing his music. His record label dropped him. And finally, after decades of accusations, he was formally charged with 10 counts of aggravated criminal sexual abuse. We are proud to stand together as allies in the fight against sexual violence and proud to stand together in defense of women of color. Dream Hampton, you are making our dreams come true.
Thank you, Gloria Steinem. I don't know that I'm gonna make you move the way that the poet just did, because you were rocking with her. And I can kind of be dystopic, and I've spent the last year in a really dark place, so this is an amazing honor just to be in this room and to have the work of my entire crew, you know, recognized, because you don't make a television show by yourself. But I'm thinking a lot, obviously, about the women's movement, and it's an honor to be, you know, have this award presented to me by Gloria Steinem. In July of 1971, of course, the National Women's Political Caucus was founded, and Gloria and Betty and Bella, and of course, Shirley Chisholm. You know, we're thinking about what my future would look like. And I think about how we are arriving. I didn't have anything written. I'm sorry, I've been getting on plane after plane. My suitcase actually went to Honolulu. So this is my pajamas that I slept in on the plane ride here. But I've been thinking about how we arrive at this same moment, asking very kind of 101 questions around feminism. I see articles in the New York Times that want to dismiss the idea of intersectionalism as if it were a new thing, as if there weren't Black women at the center of women's movement from the time that they began, not just in the 70s, but the suffragist movement, every single women's movement. I also was talking to my great friend Stacey Scherer, producer, who's doing an amazing television series right now called Mrs. America. And we were talking about the 1977 convention in Houston, where Gloria apparently went from room to room, and these rooms included Coretta Scott King, Maxine Waters, and Carmen Delgado, and she stayed up till 4 in the morning to listen to what this Women of Color flank was demanding and to put forth, you know, those demands to the larger group. So thank you for that work. It's really important. Last year, I actually did 3 films. One of them was the docuseries Surviving R. Kelly. The other one, thank you, the other one, another one was a film that I shot with Madeline Sackler, who's also not responsible for the opioid crisis, but has that name. And we shot it in an Indiana Pendleton prison where we were talking to men who've absolutely harmed women along with other people in the community. And we were talking about restorative justice. And then finally I did a that was on HBO, and finally I did a docuseries on BET called Finding Justice, where, thank you for a few of you who've seen it, another 6-part docuseries where we focused on an injustice, people who were most affected by that injustice, and then people who were leading the organizing to fight back against that injustice. And on election night, we found ourselves in Georgia at Stacey Abrams in her room. Yeah. We were focusing, of course, on voter rights and this old fight that we're having to have again. And of course, the election was stolen. Brian Kemp stole the election. And today, he stole the rights of women in Georgia to choose for themselves. So while immigration, and I know that many of us, I felt like it was the day after Trump was elected, we were at LAX having to shut down, you know, the airport as they wanted to detain and disallow folks to come into this country. We know that we're going to be having an age-old fight for control over our body and over choice. And so those who are working in reproductive rights, I just salute you. I know so many Black women at the forefront of that work. I couldn't believe the speech that Voldemort gave the other day, describing what abortion absolutely is not. But these are the times that we're living in. So it's in that landscape that I try to make media. I come from the Free State of Detroit, the Black nation of Detroit, where I felt very centered. Of course, it was a Black political and economic project led by women like Carolyn Kilpatrick, Kwame Kilpatrick's mother, who gave us people like Coleman Young. And I grew up in a city where I felt very seen and very nurtured. It wasn't until I came to NYU to attend film school that I understood, you know, what it meant to not have political and economic power. And at 19, as a film student in New York, we'd take our 18-pound cameras and we'd follow Giuliani's jump out squad, these gang members of the NYPD who would terrorize people in the neighborhood that I lived in, the formerly black Brooklyn. And we called that Cop Watch, and that too was in their tradition. It was in the tradition, of course, of folks in Oakland, the Black Panther Party. I say that to say that I've been doing it for a long time, and I sometimes feel weary, like a lot of you, but what sustains me is the women in my life, and I call them. I've been living in Los Angeles, and if you've ever lived in Los Angeles or spent time in Los Angeles, you know how lonely it can feel, how isolated you can feel. So I did these 3 film projects, but then I cooked 47 dinners last year. I got really good at making paella. And of course, I think about Barbara Smith and the Kitchen Table series and what it means to gather people at our tables and how important and healing and restorative that work can be. And I didn't talk about R. Kelly when we would have these dinners. Few of my friends even knew what I was working on, but what they didn't know is that they were saving my life just by gathering at my table and trying my paella. So if you ever came to my house, I see Katie Longmire and Nicole DeMember, who sat at my table and given me love and strength and support. This project, Surviving R. Kelly, absolutely meant to center the kind of young black girls that no one pays attention to. They've been called many things. Reagan called us names. These are regular, degular black girls that he specifically preys upon, knowing that they'll be disbelieved, that they will be doxxed when they come out and tell their story. And that's exactly what's happened. I mean, as Gloria said, there's been all this amazing kind of movement around turning away from R. Kelly, but there were also 5 million downloads of his music the weekend after our docuseries aired. My address was shared online, and people started showing up to my home. My tires were slashed. I had to move out of that Santa Monica home, 11 blocks from the beach, rent control, and where I had all these dinners. And I say not to bring the room down, but to say that too is in the tradition. I didn't make a work as important as For Colored Girls who considered suicide when the rainbow isn't enough. God bless you, and Tazaki Shange. I didn't make a work as important as Color Purple, but what happened to Alice Walker, what happened to Ntozake Shange, what drove Alice Walker into the mountains of Northern California, what some people say drove Ntozake out of the peace, that she might have had after producing this award-winning, amazing play that goes on for generations, was that they were attacked. They were attacked, by black folks, by our own community, who said that they would use hyperbolic words, some of which are being employed right now, about lynching black men. With my series, people who've watched it will say everything. They'll blame me. They'll blame the women who are finally telling their stories. They'll blame the parents, as if parents are somehow in charge of teenagers. My mother didn't know where I was from 15 to 30. But, they'll blame everyone but R. Kelly. So in this moment, I'm not a carceral feminist. I don't know what I would like to see happen with R. Kelly. I know how much violence the criminal justice system inflicts on my community, women, gender nonconforming folks, men, and I don't look to that system for justice. I fell for it for about 10 days, thinking that Mueller was gonna save me, and then I remembered he was the FBI. But I do think about what could have been restorative. I think about Brett Kavanaugh. Tarana Burke and I were talking, and I'm going to end it here, but she and I were talking about she'd been in the room when Brett Kavanaugh, during the hearings, she talks about it as being a powerful moment, and she said, what if Brett Kavanaugh, instead of putting on that, performance, what if he had said, I used to drink so much. I used to drink so much that I don't even remember half the stuff I did. I would have related. I went to high school in the 80s. We drank, right? And what if he had said, I'm not sure that I remember what happened to this woman, but I believe her. And I've spent the last 40 years trying to be a different person than I was at 17. And I'm so sorry for what I've done. Like, what if that had happened? How healing would that have been, right? And then I thought, in this conversation with Tarana, I reflected back to her what she said to me. Gayle King had just interviewed R. Kelly, and he too put on a very Trumpian performance where he yelled and deflected and made himself the victim. And I thought, what if R. Kelly, who absolutely was a victim of sexual assault from 7 to 14, formative years, what if he has said, I have no idea what healthy sex is. I was abused as a child. That trauma has gone untreated. I don't know how many women I've heard over the past 30 years, but I need help and healing, and that's the support I want. I don't want y'all to be attacking these women online who worked on this project, who spoke up in this film. I want you to use that energy to support me as I set off on a path of healing. That would have been so transformational. So these are the kinds of things I fantasize about. And thank you so much.